on earth would you support a submission that allows us to endanger further the 63 Maui dolphin? So I'm not going to take up my whole time because I think everybody else has got points to make. But I'll just read you another bit of the Auckland plan. Auckland expects that we will all have a sense of pride in our natural heritage and share the responsibility for living sustainably and looking after our environment. And one critical phrase from this, as I read from the submission, and please look at that. The critical phrase in here is this: we need to respond to emerging threats which pose risk to our natural heritage. Unless a stronger focus is given to controlling at source those activities and elements that cause environmental harm, Auckland will not achieve its vision. At source, that means we say no. That's what that means. And that's our words. This is our Auckland plan. At source means we say no to things that could endanger one of the rarest dolphins in the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Casey, and can I commend you on the brevity as well as the passion of your address. The remaining speakers on the... We're speaking to the amendment now, which has been moved by Councillors Casey and Mike Lee. So speakers have 5 minutes on the amendment. Councillor Wayne Walker.
I'll speak to some of the items on Councillor Casey's amendment. And what I want to emphasise is that this is the third time that we've considered this item. Things have moved on and things have changed, and I'll just go through some of those changes. We've got a unitary plan, and that unitary plan imposes a higher bar around the protection of the environment, around the coastal environment, around surf breaks, around a range of things, and all of those things go to the west coast, which is a pristine part of the region. That's changed. The other thing that's changed, and it's mentioned in the report, is we've signed up to the Compact of Mayors. We're part of C40. There's a Paris climate change agreement that binds nations. Effectively, it also binds local government because we are part of meeting those reductions in climate change. The other thing that's happened over the last 3 years is in terms of climate change, things have got progressively worse, not better. So global temperatures on the air and in particular in the sea are rising, and we know that the planet is at a tipping point. And I go to the point that Councillor Casey made, which is effectively about the politics of this and why we're here. We're here to represent people, not just people that are here now, but our mokopuna, future generations. We weigh things up, we make those political decisions, and these sorts of decisions are the decisions that define us because of the state of our planet, which we know is perilous. There's another fact that has certainly come to light, and it's come to light over again the last 3 years, and that is the fact that we have to keep the oil in the ground. And that is now universally acknowledged. We cannot take it out, and we cannot burn it. Otherwise, we push the planet beyond a tipping point that frankly goes to human extinction and the extinction of most forms of life on this planet. So that has changed. So I come back to the political decision that we need to make, and it is a political decision of some significance that we make for us, for the people of Auckland, and for the generations to come. And I certainly know that I will be supporting this amendment.
Thank you very much. Councillor Walker. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I actually found this to be a very good submission, particularly as it goes to the substantive points to do with climate change, to do with the effects on Maui's dolphin, and to do with environmental risks. And I think within the content of those 20-odd points, there's ample scope for us to support the amendment that's been put up by by Councillor Casey. In fact, when you do read those, you wonder why we are supporting it in the way that we are doing. There have been a number of other councils that have already made their stand. Kaikoura District Council, they opposed entire offshore release area. Gisborne District Council, the entire block off the east coast, and Christchurch City Council, the block off the Canterbury coast. So a number of our colleagues around the country have already made their political call on this, and as someone remarked, this is the third time that it's come before us, so it's probably about time that we made our mark and made a bit of a stand as well. To be honest, I'm not really convinced about the economic benefits line that's getting trotted out there for the risk. My brief research shows that there's few jobs that's actually allied to petroleum exploration. If you go to the Department of Labour statistics, in the 5-year period up to 2010, there was only 510 jobs, and that was only up 40 on the 5 years previously. So there's not a huge number of jobs, and a number of that work is taken up with permits for migrants. So it's arguable how much employment's actually coming to New Zealanders as such. There's also the question to do with the return to New Zealand. We heard there's a reasonable return to central government coffers, but I don't think there's anything to Auckland councils, is there? Nothing at all. And given the risks that are posed, and I find the attitude to the risks a little gung-ho. The Waitakere Rangers Board came up with a picture there of the Maritime New Zealand's response, and I think they mentioned two boats. They're kind of glorified tinnies. I think there's 3 actually. There's one in Auckland, there's one in Northland, and there's one in Wellington. Now, are we seriously being asked to consider that in the light of a spill, of no matter of what magnitude, that would be sufficient to respond? I don't think so. I mean, you only have to go to the Gulf of Mexico Deepwater Horizon oil spill to see what the capacity is. And I'm not for a minute suggesting it would be of that, but even any far lesser magnitude would still be disastrous. And they found, when they did a very exhaustive inquiry, this is in the United States, so you'd imagine to be the forefront of emergency response, they found that none of the major aspects of offshore drilling safety, not the regulatory oversight, not the industry safety standards, not the spill response practices, kept pace with the push into deep water. They were entirely unprepared. Now, if they were entirely unprepared and they had 1,000 boats out in the Gulf of Mexico, I doubt if our 3 tinnies will quite cut it in terms of response. So I think, Mr. Mayor, that then we weigh up the words that are actually in our submission here, when we look at the tenuous benefit in terms of the potential risk, I think it's incumbent upon us to vote here to support that amendment and to oppose the block offer in total. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Watson. Could I invite Councillor Hills to speak?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks first to the officers. It's a really well done submission, and I know it's a challenge to answer all our questions. I'll be supporting Councillor Casey's amendment. For me, it's not about politics. It's actually about making a stand. The Paris Agreement came into effect last week. Juxtaposition to that, America's elected a president who doesn't believe in climate change. I think we need to make a stand on that. I know there's a lot of arguments around, oh yes, but we use oil. Well, we're living in an oil-dependent society, and if we don't actually start making change or just carrying on, then signing the agreement is a bit of a waste of time. I still use paper, but I don't want to cut down our native bush to use that paper. So I think it's about where it is. It's not being about against oil or oil drilling. It's about looking at where it is. Deep sea, which we know is dangerous. We've got our Maui's dolphins. We've got our coastline. You can be for dairy, but we don't allow cows near rivers or on our beaches or in our native bush. So this is about context of where this is happening, why this is happening. We are going to be dependent on oil for a while longer, but I would rather be investing in renewable sources and, talking to young people. We started children's panels when I was on the Kaipātiki local board and the intermediates and the colleges. The number 1 and 2 things that young people were all saying, climate change, sustainability, environment, it was just rolling off the tongue like I wasn't even thinking about those things when I was at school. And this is their future we're thinking about. And they sort of see this as ludicrous that you'd go out and drill in the middle of the ocean along our beautiful coastline. So it's about context. It's not about being showy, about being anti-oil. And we are doing things as a council. I personally came here and supported the Sky Path. I want to cycle from my home to work, and eventually we'll be able to do that, because we made a stand as a council. So that is making a difference. It's about transport. It's about the City Rail Link, which we can see visibly will make a change in our oil dependency. Even the construction of the City Rail Link is hooked into mains power. They're not using generators, so that's going to save hundreds of thousands of litres of diesel and oil. So we are making a stand, but this is also on the other side of the production. So I think we can, to me it's not about politics, it's just simple maths. If we keep digging and we keep letting this happen, then we're going to create a world that we're actually not in favour of. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. Councillor Darby.
Thank you, Mayor Goff. And there's been some good contributions here today. Councillor Casey started out by pointing out paragraph 14 and attachment C, the submission and the wording there. And I looked at that wording and I thought, well, that wording could equally read, exploration and production of these resources will further contribute to climate change affecting Auckland. There's no doubt that if you wrote those words, no one could debate those words. And so I'm saying, why don't we write those words? And my emphasis, and just speaking to this briefly, is on the Roman 3, on the climate change issue. This is an issue that is breathing down our necks hot. And it's no comforting warm glow anymore. It is a blowtorch, and it's fueled by this incredible build-up of gases that we are all creating. And so this council, unlike the former councils, the 2010 to 13 and 13 to 16, I think this refreshed start that we talk about has the opportunity to step up in the climate change space. Former Auckland councils have not. We have signed up, as others have spoken, to various agreements. Let's make sure that we cannot be accused of signing just in pencil and not ink. Because if we don't strengthen our submission, particularly on climate change, that signature of just last year by government and us and Paris and for C40 is a signature really worth erasing. So this is our chance, members. We cannot afford to be continuing to act in ignorance when it comes to climate change. And some people have spoken very passionately here today and rather loudly. But it's just come to that point where people are desperate. And it's not just those in governance that are, I think, desperate. It's those in our community who are desperate. And are desperate to see leadership because it has been lacking in this space. Just around the world right now, I think in the last few days, the World Met Office has filed a report. And it's confirmed that over pre-industrialisation temperatures, we're now +1 degree. And remember, the Paris Agreement was about keeping it under 2, that's the minimum, but preferably under 1.5. Those are the targets. So we are running very close to that now. It's desperately close. And we are already seeing extreme rainfall events. I mean, the UK, just refresh your memory of what was happening in the UK not so long ago. And the damaging flooding there in Europe, we've had it ourselves here. We've had heat waves in East Africa, drought and famine that have followed that, the displacement of peoples, millions of peoples. Last 5 years, the hottest on record. Last year was the hottest single year, and it is predicted that 16 will be hotter than 15. So the writing's on the wall. All the evidence is there. If we talk about evidence-based decision-making, look at all that evidence that we've been reminded of in just the last week, if you have been reading the media. Glaciers are retreating. The Arctic ice sheet is dissolving. It is going away. Sea levels are rising. Species are being depleted. not just the Maoris dolphin is at risk. There are thousands of species, and ultimately our species. So those climate migrations have started out of Africa, and they are moving towards the north of Africa and into Europe, and they will be far greater than the Syrian migrations from war. So councils have looked the other way. We shall not look the other way anymore. This council shall not look the other way. It has to face up on all fronts and not just convenient fronts. And this is an important front. Offshore oil exploration is just a yesterday business.